The gunshot echoed through the frigid January night just as Clara Bennett, knees buckled beneath her on the icy street of Truckee, California, her vision blurring as snowflakes settled on her eyelashes like tiny frozen tears. She had been running for 3 days straight, ever since she witnessed her employer murdered in cold blood at the Sacramento Mercantile, where she worked as a seamstress. The killers had seen her face through the window, and she knew they would come for her next. Clara had scraped together every penny she owned, bought passage on a stagecoach heading into the Sierra Nevada mountains, and prayed that the winter of 1875 would hide her better than the crowded streets of Sacramento ever could. But the cold was merciless, seeping through her thin wool coat and worn boots, stealing the warmth from her body with each passing hour. She had not eaten in 2 days, spending her last coins on the stagecoach fare, and the altitude made her head spin with dizzying intensity. The street was nearly empty at this late hour, most sensible folks having retreated indoors where fires blazed and hot coffee warmed frozen hands. Clara's breathing came in shallow gasps as she stumbled past the shuttered storefronts, her carpetbag clutched against her chest like a shield. She could hear footsteps behind her, heavy boots crunching in the snow, and she did not dare look back to see if they belonged to the men who wanted her dead. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through, then her legs simply gave out. One moment she was moving forward through sheer force of will, and the next she was falling, the frozen street rushing up to meet her. She landed hard on her side, the impact knocking what little breath remained from her lungs. The carpetbag tumbled from her grasp and spilled open, her few belongings scattering across the snow-covered ground. A pair of stockings, a hairbrush that had belonged to her mother, a small leather journal where she recorded her sewing patterns. Everything she owned in the world, spread out for anyone to see. Clara tried to push herself up, but her arms trembled with exhaustion and would not support her weight. The cold penetrated her bones, making her muscles seize and her teeth chatter violently. She was going to die here, she realized with a strange sort of clarity. Either the cold would take her, or the men following her would finish what they started. Either way, she would never see another sunrise, never feel warmth again, never know what it meant to be truly safe. She heard the footsteps grow closer, heard someone calling out, but the words were muffled and distant as if she were underwater. Her eyes fluttered closed against her will, the darkness reaching for her with gentle, insistent fingers. Then strong hands were lifting her, cradling her against a solid chest that radiated blessed heat. A deep voice spoke close to her ear, rough with concern and something else she could not quite name. "You are safe with me now." Clara forced her eyes open, struggling to focus on the face above her. She saw dark eyes beneath the brim of a weathered cowboy hat, a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of stubble, and lips pressed into a thin line of worry. The man holding her wore a heavy sheepskin coat, and she could feel the warmth of him even through the layers of clothing between them. He was tall and broad-shouldered, built like someone who spent his days doing hard physical labor, and he held her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. "The men," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They are coming." "Nobody is going to hurt you," he said firmly, already moving down the street with long, purposeful strides. "I have got you." Clara wanted to protest, wanted to warn him that he was putting himself in danger, but exhaustion dragged her under before she could form the words. She was vaguely aware of being carried through a doorway, of blessed warmth washing over her, of being laid down on something soft. Then there was nothing but darkness and the lingering echo of those words. "You are safe with me now." When Clara woke, she found herself in a small room with rough-hewn wooden walls and a single window through which pale morning light filtered. She was lying in a narrow bed covered with thick wool blankets, and someone had removed her wet boots and coat. A fire crackled in a small potbelly stove in the corner, filling the space with welcome heat. Her carpetbag sat on a chair beside the bed, her belongings carefully repacked. She pushed herself up slowly, her head swimming with the movement. Every muscle in her body ached and her throat felt raw and scratchy. But she was alive, and she was warm, and those two facts seemed nothing short of miraculous. The door opened and the man from last night entered, carrying a tray with a steaming bowl and a cup. In the daylight, Clara could see him more clearly. He was perhaps 26 or 27 years old, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that fell to his collar. His eyes were a deep brown, almost black, and they studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He wore simple clothes, a cotton shirt and denim pants held up with suspenders, and his movements were economical and practiced as he set the tray on the small table beside the bed. "You should eat," he said without preamble. "It is just broth and bread, but it will help." "Where am I?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Above the livery stable where I work. This is my room." He pulled the chair closer and sat down, his large frame making the simple furniture seem small. "My name is Samuel Fletcher. I found you collapsed on Main Street last night." "You were near frozen solid." "Clara Bennett," she managed. "Thank you for helping me. I should go." She started to swing her legs out of bed, but Samuel held up a hand. "You are not going anywhere until you eat something and get your strength back. You were running a fever most of the night." "Whatever you are running from can wait a few hours." Clara froze, her eyes widening. "I am not running from anything." "Miss Bennett, you collapsed in the street at 11 o'clock at night in the middle of a snowstorm, wearing clothes too thin for this weather, and carrying everything you own in that bag there. Either you are running from something, or you are running towards something, and given how terrified you looked when I picked you up, I am guessing it is the former." His voice was matter of fact, not unkind. "I am not asking you to tell me your story, but I am asking you to eat and rest before you do anything foolish." Clara studied him for a long moment, trying to gauge whether she could trust him. She had learned the hard way that not all men who offered help did so with pure intentions. But there was something steady about Samuel Fletcher, something solid and trustworthy in the way he met her eyes without flinching, in the way he kept a respectful distance even though they were alone in his room. "Why did you help me?" she asked instead of answering his unspoken question. Samuel was quiet for a moment, his gaze dropping to his hands. "My sister died 3 winters ago. She got caught in a blizzard coming home from town and froze to death less than a mile from our ranch. I found her the next morning." He looked up, and Clara saw old pain in his eyes. "I could not save her, but I could save you, so I did." The simple honesty of his answer moved something deep in Clara's chest. She reached for the bowl of broth with trembling hands and took a small sip. The warm liquid felt like heaven sliding down her raw throat, and she realized just how hungry she truly was. She ate slowly, aware of Samuel watching her with those dark, observant eyes. "How long was I asleep?" she asked between bites of bread. "About 8 hours. It is just past 7 in the morning." Samuel leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "The doctor came by last night to look you over. He said you were suffering from exhaustion and exposure, but that you would be fine with rest and food. I paid him, so you do not need to worry about that." "I will pay you back," Clara said quickly. "Every penny. I just need to find work. There is no rush." Samuel stood and moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered street below. Truckee is not a large town, but it is growing. The railroad brought a lot of people through here, and more are staying every year. There might be work for a seamstress, if that is your trade. Clara stared at his broad back, wondering how he knew. Then she remembered her carpetbag spilling open, her sewing pattern scattered in the snow. It was my trade in Sacramento. I worked in a mercantile, doing alterations and making clothes for customers. There is a general store here that might need help. The owner's wife does most of the sewing, but she has been complaining about being overwhelmed with orders. Samuel turned back to face her. I could introduce you if you like. Why are you being so kind to me? Clara asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. You do not know me. That is true, Samuel agreed, but I know what it looks like when someone is desperate and alone. I have been there myself. He crossed his arms over his chest, his expression unreadable. Look, Miss Bennett, I am not expecting anything from you except that you take care of yourself. When you are feeling better, you can go wherever you need to go. But if you are looking for a fresh start, Truckee is as good a place as any. Clara wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that she had stumbled into the protection of a genuinely good man, that maybe her luck was finally changing. But she had been burned before by trusting too easily, and the memory of her employer's blood spreading across the mercantile floor was still fresh in her mind. The men who were following me, she said slowly. If they find me, they will kill me. I witnessed something I should not have, and they cannot risk me talking to the law. Samuel's expression hardened. Then we will make sure they do not find you. You do not understand. These are dangerous men. They murdered my employer in broad daylight and did not even try to hide it. If you help me, you will be putting yourself at risk. I have dealt with dangerous men before, Samuel said quietly. I spent 2 years working as a ranch hand in Texas before I came here. I saw my share of violence. I know how to handle myself. Clara set down the empty bowl, her hands shaking slightly. I do not want anyone else to die because of me. Samuel crossed the room and crouched down beside the bed so they were at eye level. Up close, Clara could see the fine lines around his eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the sincerity in his gaze. Listen to me. You did not kill anyone. You did not do anything wrong except be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The guilt belongs to the men who pulled the trigger, not to you. Tears pricked at Clara's eyes, the first she had allowed herself since fleeing Sacramento. His name was Mr. Whitmore. He gave me a job when no one else would, when I first arrived in California with nothing. He was a good man, and they shot him like he was nothing. I am sorry, Samuel said, and she could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. That is a hard thing to carry. I should have done something. Called for help, or tried to stop them, or you would be dead too if you had done any of those things, Samuel interrupted gently. You survived, Miss Bennett. That is not something to feel guilty about. Clara wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. I do not even know if running was the right choice. Maybe I should have gone to the law in Sacramento. Maybe, Samuel acknowledged, but you are here now, and we need to figure out what comes next. He stood and moved back to the window. First thing is to get you properly recovered. Then we can talk about longer-term plans. I know the sheriff here, and he is a decent man. If those men show up in Truckee, he will handle them. What if they have already come? What if they are out there right now looking for me? Then they would have found you last night when you were lying in the street, Samuel pointed out. My guess is they lost your trail somewhere between Sacramento and here, or they think you headed in a different direction. Truckee is not exactly the first place someone would look for a runaway witness. Clara considered this. It was true that she had been careful about covering her tracks, taking a roundabout route and using a false name to buy her stage-coach ticket. Unless someone had seen her board in Sacramento, there was no reason to think the killers would trace her here. The thought offered a small measure of comfort, though the fear still sat heavy in her chest. "Get some more rest," Samuel said, moving toward the door. "I need to get to work, but I will be downstairs in the stable if you need anything. There is more bread and water on the table and a chamber pot under the bed if you need it. The door locks from the inside, so use it. I will check on you at lunch." "Mr. Fletcher," Clara called as he reached for the door handle. He paused and looked back at her. "Thank you, truly." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, transforming his serious face into something warmer. "You are welcome, Miss Bennett. Now rest." After he left, Clara lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. The room was simple but clean, clearly belonging to a man who kept his life organized and uncluttered. A few books sat on a shelf beside the bed, their spines worn from repeated reading. A hat hung from a peg on the wall, and a pair of boots sat neatly beside the door. She tried to imagine Samuel Fletcher in this space, reading by lamplight or lying in this very bed, and found the image oddly comforting. She must have dozed off again because the next thing she knew, the light coming through the window had shifted and someone was knocking softly on the door. Clara's heart leaped into her throat, and she pulled the blankets up to her chin. "Miss Bennett, it is just me," Samuel's voice came through the wood. "May I come in?" Clara exhaled in relief. "Yes." Samuel entered carrying another tray, this one laden with a more substantial meal. There was soup thick with vegetables and meat, fresh bread still warm from the oven, and a cup of what smelled like coffee. The aroma made Clara's stomach growl audibly. "Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house sent this over when I told her about you," Samuel explained, setting the tray down. "She is the closest thing Truckee has to a town mother. She looks after everyone." "Does she know who I am?" Clara asked nervously. "I told her you were a friend who arrived unexpectedly and took ill." She did not press for details. Samuel pulled up the chair again. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Clara admitted. The sleep had helped and the fever seemed to have broken. She still felt weak and shaky, but the bone-deep exhaustion had eased somewhat. "I should not be taking up your bed. You must need to sleep. I have a cot downstairs in the tack room. I have been sleeping there." Samuel waved away her protest before she could voice it. "It is fine. I have slept in worse places." Clara picked up the soup spoon, then paused. "Will you tell me about your sister?" Samuel's expression grew distant. "Her name was Sarah. She was 2 years younger than me and twice as stubborn. She wanted to be a teacher, spent all her free time reading and practicing her letters. The winter she died, she had been in town interviewing for a position at the schoolhouse." He was quiet for a moment. "She was so excited when she started home. The teacher who was leaving told her the job was hers if she wanted it. But a storm rolled in fast, the way they do up here in the mountains. She tried to make it home anyway instead of staying in town. My father and I found her the next morning, less than a mile from the ranch. She had gotten turned around in the whiteout." "I am so sorry," Clara said softly. "That must have been devastating." "It broke my father," Samuel said bluntly. "He never recovered from losing her. He died the following spring, and I think it was as much from a broken heart as anything else. I sold the ranch after that and came here. Could not stand being in that place without them." "Is that why you work at the livery instead of ranching?" Samuel nodded. "I still work with horses, which I have always loved. But I do not have to carry the weight of keeping a whole ranch running by myself. It suits me better." Clara ate her soup slowly, processing this information. Samuel Fletcher was not just a kind stranger who had helped her on impulse. He was a man carrying his own grief, his own losses, and somehow he had found it in himself to extend compassion to her anyway. The realization made her throat tighten with emotion. "I grew up in Illinois," she offered, feeling like she owed him something in return for his honesty. My parents died when I was 16, and I went to live with my aunt in Chicago. She was not unkind, but she made it clear I was a burden. As soon as I was old enough, I left. I worked my way west, doing sewing and alterations in various towns until I ended up in Sacramento 2 years ago. "Do you have any other family?" Samuel asked. "An older brother, last I heard, but we lost touch years ago. He went to fight in the war and never came home to Illinois. I do not know if he is alive or dead." Clara stirred her soup absently. "I always thought I would have time to find him, to reconnect. But then life kept happening and I kept putting it off, and now I do not even know where to start looking." "The war took a lot of good men," Samuel said quietly. "I was too young to serve, but I remember when the soldiers started coming home. Some of them were never the same." They fell into a comfortable silence, Clara eating and Samuel sitting quietly, his presence somehow reassuring rather than oppressive. When she finished the meal, she felt more human than she had in days. "The general store owner is named Marcus Holbrook," Samuel said, standing to collect the empty dishes. "His wife Hannah does the sewing. I mentioned to Marcus this morning that I knew someone who might be able to help with their backlog. He said to bring you by when you are feeling up to it." "You did not have to do that," Clara protested weakly. "I know," Samuel said simply, "but I wanted to. Besides, if you are going to stay in Truckee, you will need work, unless you have somewhere else you need to be." Clara shook her head slowly. No, I do not have anywhere else to go." "Then Truckee it is." Samuel moved toward the door, then paused. "There is a basin and pitcher over on the dresser if you want to wash up. I brought some of Mrs. Patterson's lavender soap. It is nicer than the lye soap I use, and there is a clean dress in the wardrobe that might fit you. It belonged to Sarah, and I have been holding on to her things for no good reason. She would want someone to get use out of them." Before Clara could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. She sat in the quiet room, overwhelmed by the generosity of this near stranger who had given her shelter, food, work prospects, and now clothing with no expectation of repayment. It was so different from what she had come to expect from the world that she hardly knew how to process it. Clara spent the afternoon washing and resting, trying on the dress Samuel had mentioned. It was a simple calico print in shades of blue, well made but clearly worn with love. It fit reasonably well, a little loose in the shoulders but otherwise fine. Wearing a dead woman's clothes should have felt strange, but instead Clara felt honored, as if Sarah Fletcher was extending the same kindness her brother had shown. By evening, Clara felt strong enough to venture downstairs. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and carefully made her way down the narrow staircase that led to the stable below. The rich smell of horses and hay greeted her, along with the warm glow of lantern light. She could hear Samuel's voice speaking softly, and she followed the sound to a stall near the back. He was grooming a large bay mare, his movements gentle and practiced. The horse stood quietly under his ministrations, clearly comfortable with him. Clara watched for a moment, struck by the care he showed the animal, the way his rough hands moved with surprising delicacy over her coat. "She is beautiful," Clara said softly. Samuel glanced up, surprise flickering across his face. "You should not be out of bed." "I have been in bed all day. I needed to move around." Clara approached the stall slowly, not wanting to spook the horse. "What is her name?" "Juniper. She belongs to one of the ladies in town. I am boarding her while her owner is away visiting family." Samuel ran the brush down Juniper's flank one more time, then set it aside. "How are you feeling?" "Much better. Strong enough to walk to the general store tomorrow, I think." Samuel studied her critically. "We will see how you are in the morning. No sense rushing things." "I cannot hide in your room forever, Mr. Fletcher." "Samuel," he corrected. And you are not hiding. You are recovering. There is a difference. Clara wrapped the shawl more tightly around herself, suddenly aware of how intimate it felt to be standing here in the dim stable with Samuel, wearing his sister's dress and accepting his protection. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his hand resting on Juniper's neck. "I told you about Sarah. What I did not tell you is that I have spent the last 3 years feeling like I failed her. Like I should have insisted she stay in town that night, should have gone with her, should have done something different. I know it is not rational, but the guilt ate at me anyway." He looked at Clara, his dark eyes reflecting the lantern light. "When I saw you lying in that street last night, it was like I was getting a second chance. A chance to save someone when it mattered. Does that make sense?" "Yes," Clara whispered. "It does. Besides," Samuel added, a hint of humor entering his voice, "you looked pathetic. What kind of man would I be if I just stepped over you?" Despite everything, Clara laughed. It felt strange, that sound of genuine amusement after so many days of fear and grief. But it also felt good, like maybe she was allowed to experience something other than terror. They stood there in the warm stable, the comfortable silence of Juniper's breathing filling the space between them. Clara found herself studying Samuel's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, not pretty but striking, the kind of face that belonged to a man who worked hard and lived honestly. "I should let you finish your work," Clara said finally, though she was reluctant to leave. "I am done for the night. Just need to lock up." Samuel gave Juniper a final pat and stepped out of the stall. "Are you hungry? We could walk over to the boarding house for supper." Clara's immediate instinct was to refuse, to hide away where no one could see her, but Samuel was right that she could not stay locked in his room forever. If she was going to make a life here in Truckee, she needed to start engaging with the town. And the thought of sitting across from Samuel over a proper meal, of having a normal conversation like normal people, was surprisingly appealing. "I would like that," she said. Samuel's face broke into a smile, and Clara felt her breath catch. He was truly handsome when he smiled, the expression softening all his hard edges and revealing the genuinely good man beneath. "Let me just wash up and we can go." 20 minutes later, they were walking through the cold evening air toward Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. The temperature had dropped with the setting sun, and Clara was grateful for the warm shawl and the proximity of Samuel beside her. The street was quiet, most people already indoors for the evening, but a few other folks were out and about. Samuel nodded greetings to the people they passed, and Clara kept her head down, not wanting to draw attention. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a large, 2-story building with warm light spilling from every window. The smell of cooking food wafted out when Samuel opened the door, and Clara's stomach rumbled in anticipation. Inside, a dozen or so people sat at a long communal table, laughing and talking as they passed dishes around. Mrs. Patterson herself appeared from the kitchen, a plump woman with gray hair and a warm smile. "Samuel Fletcher, you brought your friend. Come in, come in. There is plenty of food." Samuel helped Clara out of her shawl and guided her to 2 empty seats near the end of the table. The other diners regarded her with friendly curiosity, but no one pressed for information. Mrs. Patterson bustled over with plates piled high with roasted chicken, potatoes, and carrots, and Clara found herself tucking in with genuine appetite. The conversation flowed around her, talk of weather and business and local gossip. Samuel participated minimally, mostly listening and eating, but Clara noticed how people treated him with respect and genuine affection. He was clearly a valued member of this small community, someone people trusted and liked. "So you are a seamstress. A woman across the table asked Clara. She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and work-worn hands. "I am Hannah Holbrook. My husband Marcus owns the general store. Samuel mentioned you might be looking for work." "Yes, madam," Clara said quietly. "I have been sewing since I was a girl. Alterations, dressmaking, whatever is needed." "Well, I could certainly use the help," Hannah said warmly. "I have more orders than I can handle right now. Everyone wants new clothes for spring and I cannot keep up. Would you be interested in coming by the store tomorrow? We could discuss the details." "That would be wonderful," Clara said, relief flooding through her. "Thank you so much." "Samuel speaks highly of your skills," Hannah continued. "That is good enough for me. Any friend of Samuel's is welcome here." Clara glanced at Samuel, who was studiously focused on his dinner as if he had not been instrumental in securing this opportunity for her. Her heart swelled with gratitude and something else, something warmer and more complicated that she was not quite ready to examine. After dinner, Samuel and Clara walked back through the cold night air. The streets were even quieter now, and overhead the stars blazed with brilliant intensity in the clear mountain sky. Clara tipped her head back to look at them, momentarily forgetting her troubles in the face of such beauty. "It is different here than in Sacramento," she murmured. "Quieter, cleaner. Mountain air," Samuel said. "Takes some getting used to if you are not accustomed to the altitude, but most people come to love it." "You love it?" Clara asked. Samuel considered the question. "I have made a life here. That is close enough." They reached the livery stable and climbed the stairs to Samuel's room. Clara was acutely aware that she would be spending another night in his bed while he slept on a cot in the tack room, and the impropriety of the situation suddenly struck her. "I should find my own lodging," she said as they reached the door. "This is not proper, me staying here." "Where else would you go?" Samuel asked practically. "The boarding house is full and the hotel is expensive. You need to save your money until you have steady work. But people will talk. It could damage your reputation." Samuel laughed, a low rumble that Clara felt in her chest. "Miss Bennett, I am a stable hand who lives above a barn. I do not have much of a reputation to damage, and anyone who wants to gossip about me helping someone in need can take their business elsewhere." "You make it sound so simple," Clara said. "It is simple. You needed help, I helped you. Everything else is just noise." Samuel reached past her to unlock the door. "Get some sleep. You have a big day tomorrow." Clara stepped into the warm room, then turned back to face him. "Samuel, I do not know how I will ever repay you for your kindness." "You do not need to repay me," Samuel said firmly. "Just build yourself a good life here. That will be payment enough." He left before she could respond, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Clara closed the door and leaned against it, her heart full of emotions she could not quite name. Samuel Fletcher had saved her life, given her shelter, found her work, and asked for nothing in return. He was unlike any man she had ever known, and she found herself thinking about him long into the night, even after she finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Clara woke early, washed and dressed carefully in Sarah's blue calico dress, and braided her dark hair into a neat plait down her back. When she descended to the stable, she found Samuel already at work, mucking out stalls. He looked up as she approached, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold. "Good morning," he said. "You look better, color in your cheeks." "I feel better," Clara confirmed. "Ready to go see Mrs. Holbrook if you still have time to take me. Let me just finish up here and wash. Give me 15 minutes. Clara waited, watching him work with the easy efficiency of someone who knew his trade well. He moved quickly but carefully, making sure each horse had fresh water and feed before moving to the next stall. When he was done, he stripped off his work gloves and scrubbed his hands and face at the pump outside, then changed into a cleaner shirt. They walked together through the morning streets of Truckee. In the daylight, Clara could see the town more clearly. It was small but well established, with solid wooden buildings lining the main street and the Sierra Nevada mountains rising dramatically in the distance. Snow clung to everything, giving the world a pristine, almost magical quality. The morning air was so cold it hurt to breathe, but Clara found she did not mind. It felt clean, honest, real. The general store was a large building near the center of town, its windows displaying bolts of fabric, tools, and various sundries. A bell chimed as they entered, and Clara was immediately enveloped by the warm, crowded atmosphere inside. Shelves lined every wall, packed with goods, and the air smelled of coffee, leather, and new cloth. Hannah Holbrook emerged from the back room, her face lighting up when she saw them. "Samuel, Clara, good morning. I was hoping you would come by early." Samuel touched his hat in greeting. "I will leave you ladies to talk business. I need to get back to the stable." He left, and Clara felt his absence like a physical thing. But Hannah's friendly manner put her at ease, and soon she was examining bolts of fabric and discussing alterations that needed to be done. Hannah showed her the small workroom at the back of the store, where a sewing machine sat alongside baskets full of mending and partially completed garments. "The work is steady," Hannah explained. "Not glamorous, but it pays fairly. I can offer you 15 cents for simple alterations, 25 for more complex work, and we can negotiate prices for full garments. You would work here in the store, and I would provide materials." "Does that sound acceptable?" It was more than fair, actually. "Yes, madam, that sounds wonderful. Excellent. Can you start today?" Hannah gestured to the overflowing baskets. "I know you are still recovering, but even a few hours would help." Clara spent the rest of the morning hemming trousers and taking in the waist of a dress. The familiar work was soothing, her hands remembering the rhythms even though her mind wandered. She thought about Samuel, about the strange twist of fate that had brought her to Truckee and into his path. She thought about the men who might still be looking for her, and whether she was truly safe here. She thought about Mr. Whitmore and the guilt she still carried, wondering if she would ever be able to let it go. At noon, Hannah brought her lunch and insisted she take a break. "You are working too hard for someone who was at death's door 2 days ago," she scolded gently. "Pace yourself." Clara ate the bread and cheese gratefully, realizing she had lost track of time in the comfort of her sewing. Through the window, she could see people moving about their business on the street, and she found herself watching for Samuel's tall form. When she finally spotted him leading a horse toward the blacksmith shop, her heart did a strange little skip in her chest. "This is dangerous," she told herself. She could not afford to develop feelings for Samuel Fletcher, no matter how kind he had been. She was here to hide, to survive, to rebuild her life. Getting emotionally entangled with anyone would only complicate things. Besides, he had made it clear he was helping her out of guilt over his sister's death, not because he had any romantic interest in her. But when Samuel appeared at the general store near closing time to walk her back to the stable, Clara could not help the way her face lit up at the sight of him. And when he smiled back at her, something warm and genuine in his eyes, she wondered if maybe she was not the only one feeling the pull between them. The next 2 weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Clara would wake in Samuel's room, dress, and walk to the general store where she would spend the day sewing. Hannah proved to be a warm and generous employer, often sending Clara home with extra food or small gifts. Samuel would appear each evening to walk Clara back to the stable, and they would have dinner together at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. Afterwards, they would sit in the stable talking while Samuel worked, their conversations ranging from the mundane to the deeply personal. Clara learned that Samuel had dreamed of becoming a veterinarian when he was younger, that he loved to read but rarely had time for it anymore, that his favorite meal was his mother's pot roast, and he had never found anyone who could replicate it. She learned that he was thoughtful and observant, that he noticed small details and remembered things people told him. She learned that, beneath his quiet exterior, was a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor that emerged when he felt comfortable. Samuel learned that Clara had always wanted to design dresses, not just alter them, that she kept a journal full of sketches and patterns she had created. He learned that she missed her brother desperately and harbored guilt over losing touch with him. He learned that she loved poetry but was too embarrassed to admit it to most people, that she had a remarkable memory for faces and details, that she was stronger than she looked. They did not speak about the circumstances that brought Clara to Truckee, and Samuel did not press her for information. But the shadow of it hung over Clara constantly, the fear that the men who killed Mr. Whitmore would somehow track her down. She found herself jumping at sudden noises, watching the street nervously for unfamiliar faces. Samuel seemed to sense her anxiety, and he made a point of always being nearby, a quiet, steady presence that made her feel safer. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after Clara arrived in Truckee, Samuel appeared at the general store with a troubled expression. Clara was just finishing up for the day, and her heart sank when she saw his face. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. "There are 2 men in town asking questions," Samuel said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "They have been showing a sketch around, asking if anyone has seen the woman in the picture." Clara's blood ran cold. "A sketch of me? I have not seen it myself, but Marcus mentioned it to me. He said the men claimed they were looking for a missing sister, but something about them did not sit right with him. They are staying at the hotel." Clara's hands shook as she gathered her things. This was it then. The men had found her. All her running, all her caution, and it had not been enough. "I need to leave, tonight, before they find me." "No," Samuel said firmly. "Running will only draw attention. If they are showing a sketch around, they are not certain you are here. We need to be smart about this." "Samuel, you do not understand. These men are killers." "If they find me—" "They will not find you," Samuel interrupted. "Not if we are careful. Listen to me, Clara. I have a plan, but you need to trust me." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to flee into the night and take her chances on the road. But the memory of collapsing in the frozen street, of nearly dying alone and terrified, stopped her. She looked into Samuel's steady dark eyes and made a choice. "I trust you," she said. Samuel's plan was simple but effective. That night, Clara did not return to the room above the stable. Instead, Samuel took her to a small cabin on the outskirts of town, a place owned by an old friend who was away for the winter. It was rustic but secure, with a good lock on the door and no neighbors to observe comings and goings. Samuel brought her supplies, food and water and extra blankets, and promised to check on her daily. "Stay inside and keep the curtains drawn," he instructed. "I will deal with those men and find out what they know. In the meantime, you need to stay hidden." "What will you tell them if they ask about me?" "Nothing, because they have no reason to ask me specifically. But if they do, I will say I have not seen anyone matching your description." Samuel paused at the door. "Clara, I need you to promise me you will not do anything foolish. No matter what happens, stay here until I come for you." "I promise," Clara whispered. After Samuel left, locking the door behind him, Clara sat in the dark cabin and tried to calm her racing heart. She was safe here, she told herself. Samuel would protect her. But the fear was a living thing in her chest, coiling tighter with each passing hour. She did not see Samuel the next day, or the day after that. The waiting was agony, each minute stretching into eternity as Clara imagined all the terrible things that might have happened. What if the men had hurt Samuel? What if they had figured out he was helping her and killed him the way they killed Mr. Whitmore? The thought made her physically ill. On the third day, Clara heard footsteps outside the cabin and froze. Someone was trying the door handle, testing the lock. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. Then Samuel's voice came through the wood, low and urgent. "Clara, it is me. Let me in." She flew to the door and fumbled with the lock, nearly sobbing with relief when she finally got it open. Samuel stepped inside quickly, closing and relocking the door behind him. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes and tension in every line of his body. "What happened?" Clara demanded. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Samuel assured her, "but we have a problem. Those men are definitely looking for you. They have been questioning everyone in town, showing that sketch. It is a good likeness, Clara, good enough that people might recognize you if they think about it." "Did anyone tell them they had seen me?" Hannah and Marcus did not, and neither did Mrs. Patterson or anyone else who knows you well. But some of the other folks in town might have mentioned seeing a new woman in town. The men are being persistent. Samuel ran a hand through his hair. "I talked to Sheriff Morrison about it, told him the whole story about what you witnessed in Sacramento. He wants to help, but his authority is limited. He can keep an eye on those men while they are here, but he cannot arrest them without proof they have done something wrong." Clara sank into a chair, despair washing over her. "Then it is only a matter of time before they find me. I should leave, get as far from here as possible before they hurt anyone else." "That is exactly what they want you to do," Samuel said, kneeling in front of her chair. "Clara, listen to me. If you run, they will follow. And the next time you collapse in the street, I might not be there to pick you up. Your best chance is to stay here, stay hidden, and wait them out. Wait them out. Samuel, they killed a man in cold blood. They are not going to just give up and go home. Maybe not, but they also cannot stay in Truckee forever. At some point they will have to either admit defeat or move on to search somewhere else." Samuel took her hands in his calloused palms warm against her cold fingers. "I know it is hard, but you need to be patient. Let them chase shadows while we keep you safe." "I hate this," Clara whispered. "I hate feeling helpless and afraid all the time. I hate that Mr. Whitmore is dead and I cannot even testify against his killers because I am too busy hiding. I hate that I have dragged you into this mess and put you in danger." "You did not drag me into anything," Samuel said firmly. "I chose to help you, and I would make the same choice again. As for testifying, maybe someday you will get that chance. But right now, staying alive is more important than getting justice." They sat in the dim cabin, hands clasped, and Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I am so tired of being afraid." "I know," Samuel said softly. He reached up and gently wiped the tears from her face with his thumb. "I know you are. But you are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Clara Bennett. You survived something terrible and you are still here fighting. That takes courage." Clara looked into his eyes and saw something there that made her breath catch. It was not pity or obligation or guilt over a dead sister. It was something deeper, something real and powerful that she had been trying not to acknowledge for weeks now. Samuel Fletcher cared about her, not as a charity case or a second chance at redemption, but as a woman, as Clara. And God help her, she cared about him too. More than cared. She was falling in love with this quiet, steady man who had picked her up off a frozen street and given her back her life. "Samuel," she whispered. He seemed to understand what she was asking without her having to put it into words. He leaned forward slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, and Clara felt something in her chest crack open. All the fear and grief and loneliness of the past weeks came pouring out, and she kissed him back with a desperate intensity that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Why did you wait?" Clara asked. "Because you had enough to deal with without me complicating things. Because I wanted you to feel safe with me, not pressured." Samuel pulled back slightly to look at her. "Because I did not know if you felt the same way." "I feel the same way," Clara said. "I have been trying not to, telling myself it was too complicated and too dangerous. But I cannot help it, Samuel. I love you." The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and true. Samuel's face broke into a smile so bright it transformed him, and he pulled Clara into his arms, holding her like she was something precious and fragile. "I love you too," he said against her hair. "I think I have loved you since the moment I picked you up off that street, and you looked at me with those terrified eyes. I wanted to protect you, to make you feel safe, and somewhere along the way that became so much more." They held each other in the dark cabin, two broken people who had somehow found wholeness together. Outside, the wind howled and the temperature dropped, but inside they were warm, wrapped in each other's arms and the knowledge that they were no longer alone. Samuel stayed with Clara that night, and they talked until dawn about everything and nothing. They made plans for a future that seemed impossible, but also suddenly within reach. They talked about what they would do when the danger passed, about the life they could build together. Samuel admitted he had been thinking about leaving the stable and buying land to start his own ranch, and Clara confessed her dream of opening a dressmaking shop. They wove their separate dreams together into something shared and beautiful. As the first light of morning filtered through the cabin windows, Samuel reluctantly prepared to leave. "I need to get back before people start asking questions, but I will come back tonight with more food and news." "Be careful," Clara said, holding him tight. "Always," Samuel promised. He kissed her one more time, long and deep, then slipped out into the cold morning. The next week was the longest of Clara's life. Samuel visited every evening, bringing food and news and spending a few precious hours with her before returning to town. The men searching for her were still around, growing increasingly frustrated as their inquiries turned up nothing concrete. Sheriff Morrison was keeping close tabs on them, and Samuel reported that they were starting to attract unfavorable attention from the townspeople for their aggressive questioning. "People do not like outsiders coming in and making accusations," Samuel explained one evening as they shared dinner in the cabin. "And these men have not been subtle about throwing their weight around. Marcus said they got into a confrontation at the general store yesterday because Hannah would not let them search the back room." "I am so sorry," Clara said. "I never wanted to cause trouble for everyone." "You did not cause this trouble," Samuel reminded her. "The men who murdered your employer did. You are the victim here, Clara, not the villain." Despite Samuel's assurances, Clara felt the weight of guilt pressing down on her. Good people were being inconvenienced and potentially endangered because of her. Hannah and Marcus were lying to dangerous men. Mrs. Patterson was covering for her absence. Samuel was spending his evenings hiking out to this cabin and risking association with a wanted witness, all because Clara had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. On the 10th day of her hiding, Samuel arrived at the cabin with news that changed everything. "They are gone," he said, stepping inside and stamping snow from his boots. "The men left town this morning. Sheriff Morrison saw them head out toward Sacramento." Clara felt dizzy with relief. "Are you certain? They are really gone?" The sheriff watched them pack up and leave. "They gave up, Clara. They could not find you and they decided to search elsewhere." Samuel pulled her into his arms. "You are safe now." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to accept that the nightmare was over. But something held her back, some instinct that said it was not this easy. What if they come back? What if this is a trick to make me come out of hiding? We will wait a few more days to be sure, Samuel said, but I really think they are gone. Sheriff Morrison said they were talking about heading to San Francisco, that they heard rumors about a woman matching your description being seen there. San Francisco is in the completely opposite direction from here, Clara said slowly. How would that rumor start? Samuel smiled. The sheriff may have planted it. He has friends in the next town over who owed him a favor. They made sure the right gossip reached the right ears. Clara laughed, the sound surprising her. That clever man. He is on your side, Samuel said. We all are. They waited 3 more days before Clara ventured back into town, and even then she kept her head down and stayed close to Samuel. But as the days passed with no sign of the men returning, Clara slowly began to relax. She returned to work at the general store, picking up where she had left off with Hannah's alterations and orders. Life resumed something close to normal, except now everything was different because she and Samuel were together. They were discreet about their relationship, not wanting to scandalize the town, but Clara suspected people knew anyway. The way Samuel looked at her was not something that could be easily hidden, and Clara knew she looked at him the same way. Mrs. Patterson started making pointed comments about what a lovely couple they would make, and Hannah began asking Clara if she had thought about where she might want to live permanently. 2 months after the men left Truckee, Samuel came to Clara with a proposal. They were sitting in the stable after dinner, Clara mending a shirt while Samuel polished tack. He set down the harness he was working on and cleared his throat nervously. I have been thinking, he started, then paused. Clara, I know we have not known each other very long. Only 3 months, really, but I feel like I have known you forever. Clara set down her sewing, her heart beginning to race. I feel the same way. I love you, Samuel said simply. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you hum while you sew. I love how you see the good in people even after everything you have been through. I love talking to you, being near you, just knowing you exist in the world. Samuel, Clara whispered. He stood and crossed to where she sat, then dropped to one knee in the straw. From his pocket he pulled a simple gold band. This was my mother's ring. It is not fancy, but it is real, and it has been in my family for 3 generations. Clara Bennett, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears streamed down Clara's face as she nodded. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. Samuel slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he was kissing her, and Clara was kissing him back, and they were both laughing and crying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, Samuel rested his hand against her cheek. I want to do this right, he said. I want to marry you properly in the church with everyone there. I want to build us a house and give you the life you deserve. I want to make you happy for the rest of our days. You already make me happy, Clara said. You have from the very beginning. They married 6 weeks later, on a bright April morning when the snow was finally melting and the first green shoots were pushing through the earth. Clara wore a dress she had made herself, pale blue silk that Hannah had helped her order from San Francisco. Samuel wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed and his boots polished to a shine. Half the town turned out for the ceremony, crowding into the small church to witness Samuel Fletcher marry Clara Bennett. Sheriff Morrison gave Clara away, and Hannah stood as her bridesmaid. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, there was only supportive silence. And when Samuel kissed his bride, sealing their vows, Clara felt something inside her heal. She was no longer running, no longer afraid, no longer alone. She was Clara Fletcher now, beloved wife of a good man, and she had found her home at last. Samuel had indeed bought land for a ranch. Using money he had been saving for years, combined with the sale of some of Sarah's possessions, that he knew his sister would have wanted to contribute to his happiness. The property was beautiful, nestled in a valley with mountains rising on all sides and a clear stream running through it. They built a modest house together, Samuel doing most of the heavy work while Clara helped where she could and made plans for how to decorate their home. Clara also opened her dressmaking shop in town, renting a small space near the general store. Hannah sent customers her way, and word of Clara's skills spread quickly. Within 6 months, she had more work than she could handle and was considering hiring an assistant. Samuel's ranch was growing too, his herd expanding as he purchased cattle from neighboring ranches and bred his own stock. They worked hard, those first years of marriage, but they were happy. Clara had never known it was possible to be this content, to wake each morning next to someone she loved and trusted completely. Samuel was an attentive husband, considerate and affectionate, and he never took Clara for granted. He still walked her home from the shop each evening, still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world, still told her he loved her every single day. 18 months after their wedding, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Samuel one evening over dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. His face went through a series of emotions, shock and joy and fear, before settling on pure happiness. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby. Are you pleased?" Clara asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Pleased does not even begin to cover it," Samuel said. He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "You have given me so much, Clara. A home, a family, a reason to wake up happy every morning. And now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." Their son was born in the early spring, a healthy baby with dark hair and his father's serious eyes. They named him Thomas after Samuel's father, and he was perfect in every way. Samuel proved to be a devoted father, getting up for middle-of-the-night feedings and changing diapers without complaint. Clara would often find him in the nursery just watching Thomas sleep, a look of wonder on his face. "I still cannot believe he is real," Samuel admitted one night when Clara found him standing over the cradle. "That we made him, that we get to keep him." "He is real," Clara assured him, wrapping her arms around her husband's waist. "And he is ours." Life settled into a new rhythm with Thomas. The ranch continued to grow, and Clara scaled back her dressmaking work to focus on being a mother. She was surprised by how much she loved it, how natural it felt to care for this tiny person who depended on her completely. Samuel was equally devoted, and they worked together as a team to raise their son. When Thomas was 2 years old, Clara became pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, more confident in herself as a mother and in Samuel as a partner. Their daughter was born in the autumn, a bright-eyed baby girl they named Sarah after Samuel's sister. Samuel wept when Clara suggested the name, overcome with emotion. "She would have loved this," he said, holding his newborn daughter with infinite care. "She would have loved you and the kids and this whole life we have built. Thank you for honoring her memory this way." "She is part of our story," Clara said softly. "If things had not happened the way they did, if you had not lost her and carried that grief, you might not have stopped to help me that night. In a way, Sarah brought us together." Samuel nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He held his daughter close and made a silent promise to his sister's memory, that he would be the best father he could be, that he would love his family with everything he had, that he would make sure Sarah's name lived on through this beautiful child. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the area. Clara's dressmaking shop continued to thrive, and she eventually took on 2 apprentices to help with the workload. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with his father on the ranch. Sarah was bright and adventurous, always getting into mischief and making her parents laugh. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Clara with a trip to Sacramento. It was the first time she had been back to the city since fleeing a decade earlier, and she was nervous about returning. But Samuel held her hand the entire journey, and his presence gave her courage. They walked past the mercantile where Mr. Whitmore had been killed, and Clara said a prayer for the man who had been kind to her. She had never gotten justice for his murder. The men who killed him never brought to trial. But she had built a good life in spite of them, and she knew that was its own form of victory. They had tried to silence her to make her disappear, but instead she had flourished. She had found love and family and purpose, and no one could take that away from her. On the way back to Truckee, Clara turned to Samuel in the stagecoach and said, "Thank you." "For what?" he asked. "For saving my life, for giving me a home, for loving me when I could not even love myself." Clara took his hand in hers. "For everything, Samuel, for all of it." Samuel brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You saved me too, you know. I was just going through the motions before you came into my life, working and sleeping and not really living. You woke me up, Clara. You gave me a reason to hope again, to believe in good things. If anyone should be grateful, it is me." "Then we saved each other," Clara said. "Yes," Samuel agreed, pulling her close. "I suppose we did." They spent the rest of the journey home planning their future. Thomas was 12 now and showing real aptitude for ranching. Sarah was 10 and had recently announced she wanted to be a veterinarian, inspired by her father's love of animals. They talked about expanding the ranch further, about sending the children to good schools, about growing old together on the land they had built. When they finally arrived back at their ranch, the children came running out to greet them, followed by the 2 ranch hands Samuel had hired to help with the work. The house they had built together stood solid and welcoming, smoke curling from the chimney. Clara looked at it all, at the life she and Samuel had created, and felt overwhelming gratitude. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Clara and Samuel sat on the porch looking at the stars. It was a cold night, reminiscent of that first night when Samuel had found her collapsed in the street. But now Clara was warm and safe, wrapped in a blanket and held in her husband's arms. "Do you ever think about that night?" Samuel asked, as if reading her thoughts. "The night we met." "All the time," Clara admitted. "I think about how close I came to dying, how different my life would be if you had not been there, or if you had walked past without stopping. It terrifies me, how much it all came down to chance and timing." "I do not think it was chance," Samuel said quietly. "I think it was meant to be. You and me, this life, all of it. I think we were meant to find each other." Clara turned in his arms to look at him. Even after 10 years of marriage, the sight of him still made her heart skip. "Do you really believe that?" "I do," Samuel said firmly. "I think some things are just destiny, Clara, and you are mine." They sat together under the stars, 2 people who had been broken and lost and found each other in the darkness. They had survived tragedy and danger and fear and come out stronger on the other side. They had built something real and lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Thomas eventually took over most of the ranch operations, proving to be as skilled a cattleman as his father. He married a lovely girl from town and gave Samuel and Clara their first grandchildren, twin boys who looked just like their grandfather. Sarah went away to study in San Francisco, determined to pursue her dream of becoming a veterinarian. It was unconventional for a woman, but Samuel and Clara supported her completely. having learned that dreams were worth fighting for. As they grew older, Samuel and Clara found themselves with more time to simply enjoy each other's company. They would take long walks around the ranch, hand in hand, remembering all the moments that had brought them to this place. Samuel's hair turned silver, and Clara's face gained lines from years of smiling. But they were still in love, as deeply as they had been the day they married. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Thomas was there with his wife and their children. Sarah came home from San Francisco with exciting news that she had been accepted into a prestigious veterinary program. Friends from town arrived bearing food and gifts. Even Sheriff Morrison, now retired but still sharp as ever, made the journey to congratulate them. As Clara looked around at all the people who had become part of their lives, at the family they had created together, she was overwhelmed with emotion. Samuel found her standing alone on the porch and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Crying at your own party," he teased gently. "Happy tears," Clara assured him. "I was just thinking about how blessed we are, how far we have come from that night in the street." "We have come a long way," Samuel agreed. "But you know what? I would do it all again, exactly the same way if it meant ending up here with you." Clara turned in his arms and kissed him, a kiss that held 25 years of love and partnership and shared history. "I love you, Samuel Fletcher." "I love you too, Clara Fletcher. Always have, always will." They stood together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by family and friends, and Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had started as a frightened woman collapsing in a frozen street, and she had become someone strong and loved and whole. Samuel had lifted her up that night and told her she was safe, and he had spent every day since then making sure that remained true. Their story was not one of dramatic rescues or grand gestures, though it had started with one. It was a story of quiet devotion, of two people choosing each other every single day. It was a story of building a life one moment at a time, of weathering storms together, of finding joy in simple things. It was a love story in its truest form, not because it was easy or perfect, but because it was real. As the years continued to pass, Samuel and Clara grew old together on their ranch. They saw Thomas's children grow up and have children of their own. They celebrated when Sarah became one of the first female veterinarians in California and opened her own practice. They mourned when old friends passed away and rejoiced when new babies were born. Through it all, they remained each other's constant. Samuel's hair turned completely white, and his back developed an ache from years of hard ranch work. Clara's eyesight began to fail, making it difficult for her to do the intricate sewing she had once loved. But they adapted, finding new ways to spend their days. Samuel would read aloud to Clara in the evenings, his deep voice bringing stories to life. Clara would sit with Samuel while he worked with the horses, keeping him company and making him laugh with her observations about ranch life. One winter evening, 37 years after the night they met, Samuel and Clara sat by the fire in the home they had built together. Snow was falling outside, just as it had been that first night, and the world was quiet and peaceful. They were both in their 60s now, faces lined with age but eyes still bright with love. "You remember what I said to you that night?" Samuel asked suddenly. "When I picked you up off the street, you said I was safe with you," Clara replied immediately. She had never forgotten those words, had carried them with her every day since. "And were you?" Samuel asked. "Did I keep that promise?" Clara reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "Every single day," she said. "You made me feel safe when I had forgotten what that felt like. You gave me a home and a family and a reason to believe in good things again. You kept your promise, Samuel, and so much more." Samuel brought her hand to his lips and kissed it, a gesture he had repeated thousands of times over their years together. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Fletcher. That night I found you, I thought I was saving your life. But really, you were saving mine." They sat together by the fire, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and built a lifetime of light. Outside, the snow continued to fall on the mountains and valleys of Truckee, California, covering the world in pristine white. And inside their warm home, surrounded by photographs and memories, and the evidence of a life well lived, Samuel and Clara Fletcher held each other close and knew they were exactly where they belonged. Their love story had begun with a woman collapsing in a cold street and a cowboy who stopped to help. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined that first night, something beautiful and enduring and real. They had faced danger and overcome fear. They had built a family and a home. They had loved each other through joy and sorrow, through triumph and challenge, through every season of life. And as they sat together in their twilight years, hands clasped and hearts full, they knew that every moment had been worth it. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every choice that led them to this place. Because they had found something rare and precious, something that many people searched their whole lives for and never found. They had found true love, the kind that lasted through decades and trials and the simple passage of time. Samuel Fletcher had kept his promise. Clara was safe with him, had been from the very first moment he lifted her from that frozen street. And Clara had given Samuel something just as valuable in return. She had given him purpose and joy, and a reason to believe in second chances. Together, they had created a legacy that would live on through their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a legacy of love and strength and unwavering devotion. Their story was complete, a circle that began in darkness and cold and ended in warmth and light. And if you had asked either of them if they would change anything about their journey together, the answer would have been a resounding no. Because every step, every moment, every choice had led them to each other, and to this beautiful life they had built. They had saved each other, loved each other, and lived each other, and that was more than enough. It was everything,